Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Windwalk. Windwalk builds digital communities and the technologies necessary to accelerate them through their flagship software, Harbor. Harbor is an end-to-end community software that empowers community and marketing teams to delight users, measure success, and grow across an expanding number of digital channels. Harbor is a foundational technology loved by millions of gamers and integrated into the communities of the largest mobile, PC, and Web3 gaming products on the market. To learn more about this flagship product, simply head to harbor.gg or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's dive into the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Naavik Roundtable. I'm your host, Devin Becker, and with me, I have excellent panelists. As always, the ever lively Aaron Bush, and we've got Tammy Levy here as well. We are one short, but not short on topics today. We've got a lot of great stuff to talk about. We got some big raises here from Inworld. Playtika with an acquisition. EA, of course, coming in on the earnings, as we like to make sure we catch all those. The future of physical game retail. Good discussion there. And then some stuff on BattleBit Remastered. So we're just going to dive straight into it today, right into the meat of it with Inworld.
Yeah, I love the diversity of topics today, but we can go ahead and jump in with Inworld. So they raised a new funding round led by Lightspeed. And so now Inworld AI has raised, I think, about $100 million at a now $500 million valuation. So big numbers now. And for those who don't recall, Inworld AI is building an AI-based character engine that will enable studios to develop intelligent, more nuanced NPCs and plug them into their games in different ways. And obviously, much of this funding will go towards hiring, towards R&D, building infrastructure. But it's also going to go towards launching an open source version of the character engine, which I think is a smart move, and it's pretty interesting. And so, launching an open source version of what they're building, I think it'll help them not only improve more quickly in public, but as a first mover to really do so in games, it's also going to be where a lot of the early movers in terms of game developers who want to embed AI NPCs into their games will kind of lean more in that direction. Initially, at least to see what's going on, but by learning in public, improving in public, being a first mover to do so and to get into the hands of developers, that's I think a pretty smart tactic for building early competitive advantages. Obviously, it's still very, very early days, and so there's much more to prove. With Inworld specifically, but even AI more broadly in games on how it gets developed and all the intricacies of doing so, where you draw the line on, what NPCs can and can't do under different circumstances. And so it's still going to be the Wild West in some ways, but I think a smart move from Inworld. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that 4 to 5 months ago, Nico, one of our great hosts, interviewed Kylan Gibbs, Inworld's co-founder and chief product officer. And I definitely recommend checking that out just to learn more about what exactly Inworld is building and how they're thinking about NPCs in games and what it means for developers looking to implement it, what the business models are, et cetera. There's a lot of really good context in that episode. And I'm also I'm trying to work up a future panel interview that should include someone from Inworld, but probably another company or two as well, to just really dig into like the nuances of like embedding AI into games when it's still so early. What does that even mean? What are the tools to consider, the opportunities and challenges there? So I'd keep an eye out on that in the coming month or so. But, this is the biggest, games X AI company now. So important to keep an eye on it going forward, I think.
Yeah. And I when I saw this, I I've been trying to keep an eye on what Inworld is doing, because it's super interesting to see where like true AI driven NPCs look like and where they go. Over the weekend, I was actually watching a short YouTube video kind of going over the quote unquote Sims AI, and how it's evolved over time, even from like the early 90s. And throughout the whole time, I was like, that is a very smart way of doing it, but that's not AI, that's an algorithm. It's like, I want to see like true like AI in NPCs and what that ends up doing to the whole game interaction in the world, and how that all pans out and builds up. And now we have the technology to build that type of like actual AI, not just an algorithm that has kind of all of these rule sets that are like still very manually tweaked and adjusted. Even if they have formulas to it, that's an algorithm, that's not an AI. So I'm very excited to see Inworld continue to grow and build towards something that might be incredibly fun, incredibly complex, incredibly terrifying, or who knows what the future holds.
It's the Wild West. It's gonna be fun for those who can, embrace some level of crazy before it calms out. But I'm excited for it too.
I'm interested to see whether or not they start doing more from beyond just like NPC kind of stuff that like maybe is sometimes better scripted anyways, towards the like just allowing a little bit more free reign, because it makes me think of there's a lot of like the AI stuff that had been trained to learn to play games, right? That was one of the things that was a really great demonstrator of AI was letting it play games, because it's a constrained system that it could learn and is a simulation. And so you got to wonder, like, obviously you could train AI to like play like a player and emulate a player, right? Or be a bot. But what about even like AI that plays the game, but in a different way, like from the monster side of things, right? Like they could have NPCs that aren't just scripted or like guided, but actually learn how to play as a monster using its own set of monster rules in this simulation. So I'll be really interested to see where that stuff sort of goes, because you bring up this like idea of AI being not really AI before it was kind of procedural, like designed around certain stuff, but like in a way we could still sort of do that, but with like here's the rules that you follow when you learn how to play, but not the rules you have to follow in the sense of like prescriptive. So I don't know. I'm really interested to see where that goes, but I do wonder, Aaron, if you think the going to open source was one of those things that's like kind of trying to fend off like the criticism that a lot of this AI stuff gets when it's kind of closed, or even just something to try and deal with competitors, because we've seen a bit of that in the space where the open source push, like we saw the llama stuff come out from Meta, like it seems like that's a big like pushback against a lot of criticism of AI. Like, does this seem like it's that sort of thing, or is just like contributing? Like, what was it?
My guess is it's a bit of both. I think that sure, there are some people who are more fearful of AI, and when they can see it open and provide feedback and just understand how it works, it assuages criticisms. But really, I mean, I think most of it is probably more from just like the business model perspective of like just getting code into the hands of developers who want to play with it is a big deal. And we've seen other like massively successful software companies, start with open source in the past and just kind of use that as an onboarding tool to then get onto like enterprise level offerings that have upgraded features and such, like a MongoDB or others. And so I sort of think it's probably more important from the business model perspective, but it certainly doesn't hurt having it in the open. And I mean, it's about like in-game NPCs, so it's not the same level of what an open AI is working on, for example. But I just think it's a good business decision above all. But we'll see.
Cool. Well, hopefully that works out, because obviously we would hate to see AI flop fast, right? It'd be good if we actually get some traction out of this for maybe a year or two at least, maybe get some good progress before we end up in any kind of hype cycle movement. But speaking of spending a ton of money, we also have Playtika with an acquisition for a decent chunk of change.
Yeah, so Playtika announced their next acquisition. Uh, Interesting enough, their next earnings call is on August 8th. So this comes kind of like at a good time to have them talk about it more and kind of comment about, yes, we're still on our kind of acquisition strategy, very focused kind of earnings call next week. But just to go over the um, deal terms and what the acquisition entails. So they announced that they're going to be acquiring Assyrian's Youda Games portfolio. So a quick debrief on who these folks are. So Assyrian is a company that's been focused more on digital advertising and just entertainment in general. They've done and kind of dabbled on gaming a little bit over the last few years through some acquisitions. They acquired the team behind Habbo Hotel. They acquired Spill Games. They have another platform called GameDistribution.com, but that kind of has fallen to kind of second, third priority for them. Over, what's really taken over for them is the digital advertising side of things. So them thinking about, okay, we have this portfolio of games, specifically the Youda games, makes sense for them to not, if they're not focusing on it, to sell the assets. So the portfolio of games is mostly poker, card, casino games. So when you think about it, perfect fit for Playtika's core gaming expertise. And the structure of the deal is they're going to do $89.4 million upfront. And they have kind of up to $165 million in terms of performance-based earnouts. So what's interesting is, they were very transparent about the upfront versus a performance-based earnout. I think that when I read that, to me, that reads as Playtika has kind of some confidence on the games being not live service at kind of like their optimal state. So whether it's, they're not doing, aggressive live ops as Playtika would do. There's a lot of revenue optimization to be done. There's a lot of potentially like user acquisition optimization to do. So I really read that as they have confidence in them being able to grow the games. There's no notes on the current team coming over, so it sounds like it's very much an asset only acquisition. And the games that Youda has been running right now, they have been super stable for the last 3+ years. So I think that they are starting from a very stable base and something that they can potentially grow, especially with their 3 top games being poker. Honestly, their top game, Governor of Poker, is 90% of the revenue of the whole portfolio, and it's at around like 2 million monthly revenue. So it has potential to grow, especially if it's a solid poker game. So yeah, that's the gist of the acquisition. There were a few episodes back where we were reviewing the Playtika earnings, and with all the closing down new projects and cost reductions and all kind of the news that they've Playtika and a lot of these companies have been aggressively acquiring in the past. Kind of pulling back a little bit, one of the questions that we had is like, where do they go next, and how do they actually grow if they're not building new games? And this feels like it's much more in line with what their core competency is, which is, they're going to bring in these set of games and potentially, really be focused on growing them and optimizing and really running aggressive live ops on them.
Well, given the strategy shift, where they're not releasing new games, and as you said, this maybe aligns better with what they're trying to do. Do you expect more acquisitions of this type then in the future? Like maybe not right away, but maybe within the next year?
I think it's very possible. I do think it's very possible that they go and seek more of the asset only acquisitions. It's clear that also based on how Playtika has done their acquisitions and been very aggressive at maximizing for profit and closing down studios, I think they're going to have trouble finding studios that would come on board unless like their values align perfectly, or business, the way of operating business wise aligns perfectly with Playtika. I do think that they're going to have a hard time finding studios that would be excited to join Playtika as a complete, like as a full studio. That the first thing that they're going to think about is like, when are they going to close this down and move over all our games to some other team. So I think that if they want to keep doing acquisitions, like this is their best bet, and this is their best path forward, is finding served or underserviced games that are stable, that have potential to grow, that they know how to live ops and really put their team behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a couple thoughts on this. I mean, first, I think that was really well summarized. I mean, my thought is, one, like, this is a pretty small acquisition in the big scheme of Playtika. Even though it's down a ton from its highs, it still is a 4 billion plus size company. And so this is still less than 5% of what the value of Playtika. So I don't think it's a massive needle mover. Also, I mean, this is Playtika has emphasized in the past that it really wants to move away from casino and get more diversity elsewhere. But because this is a small move, I don't think it really hurts that too badly. And also, like, they kind of have fumbled other opportunities elsewhere anyways. So maybe getting back to their roots, someone at Playtika recognizes actually is their better chance to win when they can get a good deal. And maybe this is a good deal. I don't know. The one thing about the deal that strikes me as interesting is how wide the range of the acquisition value is, where the guaranteed was like 89, 90 million, but it basically, the earnout like doubles it. And that's like a pretty, like, a double is a pretty stark, difference in big range that really could go a lot of directions. And obviously we don't know the details of, what triggers different levels of earnout, but it seems like they are protecting themselves and ensuring that if they're going to pay more, it has to be because there was outperformance. So I thought that was interesting. Of course, Playtika still is in a pretty rough shape, I think. I mean, Tammy mentioned that if they want to do more acquisitions, it's kind of tough because of the reputation they've developed and how probably not that many teams really want to go sell themselves to Playtika. And this might be different because someone else is selling what isn't a priority to them anymore to Playtika. Maybe it was an easier justification. But even that said, if Playtika wants to do more deals, they still are a bit handicapped by their balance sheet. And so, again, it's a $4 billion company. And currently they have 700 something million in cash, but they have 2.4 billion or so in debt. And so, still, like, half of the value of the company is in debt right now. And so that just limits the magnitude of what they can really do as a company to bring anything else needle moving. So maybe we see more of these smaller deals. Really, they need to figure things out more organically, I think, how to launch new games and maybe build new internal studio or two to kind of trigger organic growth. That doesn't just mean paying a lot of money to acquire someone else and hurt the balance sheet further. Especially because I don't think their cash flow production is very, very robust either right now. So anyways, it's an interesting deal. It's, I guess, another small milestone for Playtika. But if they want to have bigger milestones, I think it still is going to be a tougher slog, is my guess.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that what's very stark is that the piece that you mentioned in like new games, right? Like they don't seem to be at least from what they've announced and what they've shared publicly, they don't seem very focused on the new games side of things, which honestly is like that's what moves the needle uh, to get kind of like that next like step, right? Like we even see it with a lot of companies, like even if they're let's take Supercell as like the golden child of trying new games to find like that next hit. Like you have to try to find kind of like that next step function, and they don't seem to be really investing in that part of the business at all. So it is interesting in terms of where they're kind of like in this like slog, stable, kind of down, kind of up, kind of just cruising. But how do they get out of that? And eventually, like the games are gonna decline. Like that happens, right? So what's gonna replace that decline?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I do know to their credit. I mean, they own like Wooga, and Wooga, I know they have tried to make several games, and several have gone into soft launch. And I'm sure there's others around the company, two other subsidiaries that have tried, and they just like haven't made it out of soft launch for not hitting the needed KPIs to justify further investment. So I think some of it too has just kind of been the nature of mobile and them struggling kind of with the new economic dynamics of scaling. But yeah, it does put themselves between a rock and a hard place if on one hand they're struggling with organic growth to make games that hit the KPIs that they want to move the needle and justify reinvestment. And then on the other side, not be able to acquire growth otherwise at scale. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. And maybe an acquisition like this kind of points to where it's like, well, it's not a huge budget value, and Playtika has something to offer that can help scale what they already know works, and they can unlock more value there than elsewhere. But yeah, curious to see how the Playtika story plays out over the next few years.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Wooga thing, and then also Supercell being mentioned, because both of them are still have not launched a game out of soft launch for a long time now. Like Supercell continually struggles with it. Like Clash Mini is like almost there, right? And then you had those games that they put out the one where it was like a whole bunch of them. The name's escaping me right now, but and then also the battle royale kind of one that they tried at kind of the same time, and just none of them seem to be getting past that point. And it seems to be, as you said, Aaron, it's sort of endemic of the mobile like industry in general right now. And it makes me kind of wonder, like, do we end up in a situation where they just can't take the risk on trying to find that themselves because they're continually burning money just trying to develop those over and over, and instead they go, hey, like let's look for someone who's really developing something that's already got traction and potential, like that's already made it past that soft launch phase, so they've done that for us, and we could just take the money we were going to spend on our R&D and development and stuff and just pick them up because we've got the cash that they don't have to be able to like just leapfrog that step, or we just need some new genres or some new user acquisition methods. But it seems like that whole industry is just kind of spinning in circles right now, trying to figure out some way to move forward. And everyone's kind of in this stalling pattern. I mean, it just seems like either something's got to change or the strategy's got to change in terms of how they go about the business side of things. Since it's just, even just announcing we're not even going to make new games from Playtika, like that's pretty desperate. And you even got like, Voodoo kind of stuck in their weird place where they're like, oh, hyper casual's not working anymore. So like, we're going to try and pivot, like all these kinds of things across the space. So like, I don't know. I'm really curious to see where it goes, because it seems like we're kind of at crossroads for all of mobile right now. So definitely exciting times. But speaking of earnings, as you mentioned, the earnings call for Playtika, we had one for EA. So some great stuff to dig in there as always.
Yeah, and this one can probably be kept briefer. So this quarter for EA, bookings were up 21%, earnings per share jumped 32%. That was really driven by two things. One, the continued outperformance of FIFA, and we covered the whole rebrand to EA Sports FC last week. And second, the launch of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is seemingly selling well, and it's outperforming the original game. Otherwise, it just kind of looks like business as usual for EA right now. The company generates high margin profits. The business is stable. They return, some value to shareholders via dividends and share repurchases regularly. And even with the never-ending game of executive musical chairs, the core EA engine is still chugging along. I guess I would say from an investor perspective, the big question to ask for EA is just where will long-term growth come from in the future? Because this quarter, the 21% quarterly growth is nice. But if you zoom out of a big one-off launch quarter, the growth is way lower from an annualized view. And guidance for next year is basically calling for flat-ish performance. So, what is that growth engine? It's probably not mobile. EA has dropped the ball there multiple times. Maybe it's some combination of fostering existing franchises like they did with Star Wars Jedi, or maybe how they'll innovate on The Sims, or how EA FC will have higher margins. But um, it also probably will have to come from new things too. And so I guess we'll see what that means. Probably the best thing we can point to right now are like upcoming Marvel games, like what they're doing with Iron Man and Black Panther, which are just new and on top of like the other IPs that they own, and they're building on like a Dragon Age, or like the upcoming Sims 5 game, for example. Or perhaps there'll be things that we don't see, like how they launched Apex Legends out of nowhere and literally no one saw that coming. I'm sort of skeptical of that, but I think that's the big question of just where will the growth come from? Like, what are the new projects that can lead this company to higher heights than it already is right now, even though the business is already a fundamentally great company. So that's just kind of what I'm thinking about with EA as we kind of look at the results from right now. But that's my summary. Not sure if either of you have anything you want to add about EA. It's pretty straightforward, but happy to discuss or move on.
Yeah, I mean, I just curious on your take on the Battlefield franchise future and DICE in general, where they fit into things. I know they had some shakeups, bringing over, I think it was Vince from Respawn, who was formerly from Call of Duty, and all that stuff, like to try and shape things up better. And I know they had like some plans. They wanted to reorganize what they were thinking with that. But do you think after like the big, huge, flub that was 2042 and like losing a lot of people over time, that there's still future in that franchise?
I don't have a strong take on the Battlefield franchise. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously they also closed the mobile game and just shut that down. So the scope of the franchise has diminished. I don't think it's a franchise they want to let go of by any means. So I think it still is their flagship shooter, and they'll do what they can to turn it around and create something steady and stable from it. Is my guess. But as we'll talk later with BattleBit Remastered, even like there are other games out there that are kind of scratching that itch for players and kind of with different approaches. So I think whatever they do, they'll have to come out strong. And it's not, it doesn't have the same weight as a Call of Duty or something like that. And I guess I'm probably underselling Apex when I say flagship shooter too. But yeah, I don't think they'll let go of it, but I don't have a strong take on what exactly they'll do to revive it or change the team from here.
Yeah, I guess I'll be interested to see, because you mentioned Apex, and that comes from Respawn, who was, like I said, Vince, I believe, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, starts with a Z, came over from Respawn and like kind of took over, it sounded like Battlefield. And, feel free to like email us at podcast@naavik.co if I'm slightly off on those details. But I believe that's what's going on, right? And so I'm just interested to see if that could mean something positive, because even though Titanfall probably didn't do as well, for example, as Respawn would have liked, it was an amazing game and like showed a lot of potential that then went into Apex, as you said, that just came out of nowhere. So I don't know, like I'm kind of curious, especially because of the previous problems with Battlefield 4, where it launched pretty much in a similar state of just failure, and then was like slowly pulled out, and then is like still played to this day because people love what it turned into. I don't know if that could happen with 2042, given the damage done, but having played it myself more recently, it was like a lot better. And so I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I think Battlefront probably is donezo. Like as far as the Star Wars stuff goes, I think they kind of lost that license, I believe. So probably no more of those, but at least Battlefield in general, maybe has something left there. But I guess we'll see. Like I'm hopeful because it's a franchise that I enjoy as well. But I don't know, they've goofed it a few times, so we'll see where that goes. But speaking of the future of things that may or may not have a future, I think we want to dig a little bit into a topic that's been slowly brewing, which is the future of physical games, especially in retail stores, which has slowly been kind of getting eroded, especially with GameStop. So there was a couple of different news items that I think kind of brought this topic up. One was that Tesco was actually going to just straight up stop selling physical games in their stores to free up the retail shelf space for other goods, which is an interesting thing to happen, where just an entire chain, just like, just not making enough money off it. We're going to make more money off of other stuff that we sell. Let's move on to that. And of course, like, could that lead to other big box stores and things like that considering doing that? Could we see Target go, margins aren't there for us. We need the shelf space, scoot it out of there, or Walmart or any of these other companies decide that that's just maybe not profitable or not profitable enough. And then we've also got GameStop continuing to struggle with the CFO already leaving. The continued turnover there, what looks to be like a bit of a tailspin. They've tried pivots into things like to get more into the digital space, where they realized, well, maybe physical is not going to have the future we hope it does. They tried with Congregate. They've tried to do all these other digital things. They've tried to get into the Web3 side of things with NFTs and digital games. And it seems like they've known the writings on the wall for them for a while, and they keep trying to do stuff. But I feel like one of the big the hallmarks that I see is, like, whenever I go into a GameStop store, just plushies, T-shirts, selling Magic the Gathering cards, like Pokemon cards. They've drifted, like, we're to almost a third of the store now, depending on the store you go into, is non-video game merchandise. Now, it's still tangential, of course, to video games, right? It's still like the culture and things like that. But at the same time, I could probably go to Hot Topic or Box Lunch or a number of other stores and find video game clothing and merch. And then it kind of leaves you wondering, what's the point of this other than to come in here to pre-order games, which, of course, generally doesn't work out well for most people that do it. So that, that's another issue that's come up. And then also we have some games starting to go digital only now. Like, there was a couple of them, but one of the ones that was, I think, one of the bigger AAA ones that was considering doing so was Alan Wake 2, which was in a little bit of a unique situation because it's being published by Epic. In like their kind of new publishing label. There was some things around them not really having the greatest pipeline for retail, them wanting to, like, kind of not take such a big hit on all the costs associated with manufacturing and all the distribution, all that on top of the cut that Microsoft or Sony is going to take. And also, of course, they have their own storefront on digital on PC, which, of course, PC has, I think, traditionally drifted further from physical retail sales than console has. So, that makes sense there. You've got pretty much Steam and Epic mostly controlling that storefront. So I think there's a lot to unpack there in terms of different issues, different, like, directions people are going. But I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on where you see the future of this going and whether or not we're, like, kind of in the middle of something, or this is just hard times.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I think physical sales are going to continue, easing towards zero at some distant point in the future. That's the trajectory it's been on for the past 10, 20 years at this point, and I don't think the next 10 to 20 years are going to be any different. And a company like GameStop really is just a zombie. And before we recorded, I know you even had some thoughts and parallels to Blockbuster, Devin, in saying that what you see with GameStop selling just merch today, just trying to find other things to sell, is similar to Blockbuster's final moments before they became irrelevant. And I think
maybe we'll be mentioning GameStop in the future, the way people joke about Blockbuster now, right? It'll just become one of those. Remember GameStop?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. The difference is that GameStop got so miraculously and super weirdly lucky by becoming a meme stock, right? Where just Reddit just fundamentally changed the value of this company for no fundamental reason whatsoever. And through that, the company at like much higher stock prices was just able to raise money in public markets. And so this is a company that still has like over $1 billion in cash on its balance sheet. Even though it continues to lose money year after year and close its store count or reduce its store count year after year, it's able to manage the bleed so effectively just because because it was a meme. And so they still have another decade or so where they don't have to be worried and they can just continue to test and iterate. Honestly, probably they should feel more of a sense of urgency than they do. And you've talked about the revolving door of leadership. Warren Buffett has a quote that and I'll butcher the specifics, but it's basically like when a bad business meets great management, the reputation of the business is what remains intact. And that's exactly what is happening with Blockbuster. It doesn't matter if you have 7 CEOs. If your business is fundamentally broken and not built for the future, it doesn't really matter what you do. And I don't know if there's a clear way to blow it up. Maybe they can turn it into more of a game store and also sell board games and Magic the Gathering games, have more little events or stuff. I don't know. Maybe there is some path, but no one's been able to crack that code yet. And bigger picture, right? Like seeing like an Alan Wake 2, it is different circumstances, but it is like the beginning of seeing AAA games recognize, we could actually still do okay just going digital. There are now consoles sold that don't have disc slots anymore. And I think it's, just the trend towards, 5-10 years from now, the next generation, like disc becoming even less important. And, in the same way today, like if you're still into DVDs, you can still find your Blu-ray versions somewhere. But with the emergence of like new business models like Netflix and subscription, and just the different ways that people even get content and how it's made, it just changes the way that people even buy it in the first place too. So I am I mean extremely bearish on physical. I don't know. I feel like if you're not super bearish, I would have questions, but anyways, those are my quick thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that to GameStop specifically, and I did get to experience some of it as part of Congrade, but they really they've been understanding that physical and retail gaming is going away for more than a decade now. Like when they acquired Congrade in 2010, they acquired like a bunch of other, I forget it specifically like around that time, but like digital kind of forward businesses. They also were trying to dabble on like, okay, let's see if we don't do games only, if we focus on our retail strength. They went and acquired Spring Mobile, which was cell phones off of AT&T. And then they went and moved towards the collectibles piece when they acquired ThinkGeek, which is the piece that we now see in the source, right? It's like that carried over from that ThinkGeek acquisition. I think that what they've never had a strategy, or at least like looking from the outside, never thought on how to actually like understand like what is our biggest asset of, hey, we are a physical space where gamers want to go, and how do we leverage it instead of just like how do we sell more stuff. And I think like that's always been the problem with, you see it with GameStop, you see it with Blockbuster, like they don't quite really appreciate what their biggest asset is. And at this point that ship has sailed, because now people don't like correlate GameStop as like a place to gather around physically with excitement for like the next big game, right? Like that used to be it. Now it's like that's no longer the thing. So I think like it's going to be that excruciating downward trend that we're going to see with GameStop, but just from like the trajectory that they've been on, like it doesn't seem like they're grasping like how to reinvent their business or leverage their IP or their assets. Specific, like more broadly to physical games, I do think that we're now kind of like in this pivotal kind of moment where technology is coming together to make to fully make physical games obsolete, with Wi-Fi speeds being what they are today. Like even when it's slow in some developing countries, it's still now it's starting to like pick up in terms of speeds. The hardware now has the space, like it's not expensive, like crazy expensive to have enough storage space to have your whole collection of AAA games on just downloaded and saved on the hardware instead of having to do DVD CDs, and just the availability of platforms to be able to go and find the games that you want and download them from Steam to Microsoft PlayStation stores. Like now all of that is like that technology is all coming together, where I think it's pushing, like it's that accelerating moment of like, okay, we can actually start doing without the physical game itself. And even generationally, like I'm gonna sound old here, but kids these days, they don't understand what a DVD is. Like they see a DVD and they're like, what the hell is this? Like eventually, like that's it, right? Like we're gonna have this slow decline as that generation grows, and like they are not gonna expect to buy something physically. They want like immediately, they want it downloaded on their device, whatever their device is, and that's how you get games. So I do think it's kind of like this pivotal moment where both generationally technology and kind of all these pieces are coming together to really make physical games obsolete.
Yeah, in a parallel, like I probably haven't used a DVD since I was, like in my childhood home. But I ate lunch with my dad this weekend, and he was super excited to tell me that he bought the Blu-ray edition of Waterworld, and he was so excited to add it to his collection. Um, and so, like there with games, 20 years from now, even there still might be people who are, excited to add something to their collection, and they view it more as a collection than just a means of playing. So, it's not going to zero imminently, obviously, but it's just kind of a funny aside. But the other piece of this that I feel like might be underrated in the discussion and could be a next tipping point is Game Pass, and specifically, and this is less of a comment on the viability of subscription or whether it's good or bad for the industry, but just think about Call of Duty, right? Call of Duty is a game that probably drives more physical sales than anything. But if you put it into a subscription model where suddenly for a bunch of people it makes a lot more sense just to be part of a subscription to get Call of Duty and a lot of other things, there probably is going to be another change. And, who even wants to buy Call of Duty standalone, which then even removes the question of how do you buy it when it's standalone. And so I don't know where exactly Game Pass or other subscriptions are going to go in the future, and whether other mega franchises like a Call of Duty will kind of get sucked into where that question is viable. I mean, probably with Bethesda, even like a Starfield, that's a question too. Like you could buy the physical copy or just be in Game Pass and get it along with everything else. And so that's kind of my guess of where we'll see like where the next big drop offs happen in physical sales of some of these like leading IPs. But beyond that, probably just a slow trickle.
Well, here's the twist, because there's actually like some strong benefits for game developers, assuming they can get the same, or at least relatively close to the same level of sales, in that, first off, like when you have to physically manufacture a disc, ship it out, deal with retail distribution, all that stuff. We already went through all the supply chain issues of COVID that still haven't been completely solved. We've still got all kinds of strikes affecting a lot of that stuff. There's all these issues with that. And then you have to deal with like, did we overprint? Did we underprint? Did we get enough pre-orders to really like understand what the demand for this looks like? That sort of thing, right? That's one risk. The other is used sales cannibalizing your game sales, right? Which was, GameStop's model, which was, hey, we'll buy your games and then we'll sell them back to other players for nearly twice the price as what we bought them from, but it's cheaper than what you bought the game for. Now, obviously, that was great for annual games, right? Like annual sports games or Call of Duty games, stuff like that. That was, I'm sure, a big thing, but it was like one of those things that benefited players way more than game developers. And game developers generally hated. I'm sure there were exceptions, but more often than not, they were like, this sucks because, people are just basically flipping it, when they're done with it. And obviously they tried to do things to make it online and require a disc and, tied to an account, all kinds of stuff like that. But obviously, if you just don't sell a physical copy, that just can't happen, right? It's none of these digital services are allowing any kind of resale outside of like a one Web3 experiment we won't even get into. So in general, like it's just not happening, right? And therefore, like that risk is gone. The other risk of retail distribution, you're literally printing on demand. Like when someone downloads the game, like you just give it them then. Like you don't have to pre-print the copies for digital distribution, right? Like it just doesn't happen. That being said, you have like this kind of weird hybrid, which is like the cards that go into stores. So like games that are digital only that still want some retail shelf space, like indie games, like say something like, Cuphead, it might have eventually gotten a physical version, but at least at first, you'd see just the card in Target and I'm sure other places. I think GameStop does the cards as well, where it's just a download code. And I've even seen sometimes physical games where you buy them and you just get a code in the box, which is like the weirdest thing. Like I remember that even happening, I think with, Mario Maker 2, when I got it with like the kit with like, I think it was Switch or something like that, it just came with the code. Like it was a box and everything, but like, here's the code to download the game. You, like in a way that's kind of good because like, I guess you get the day one patch already part of it, right? Like it's already updated. You don't have to install or like put it in the disk and then still update it. But it's still like this weird in-between spot that we've had. Like paralleling that with like DVDs and Blu-rays, DVDs and Blu-rays are still sold, right? They never really completely phased out, partially, as you said, because of like collectors and the kinds of features that they put on those and people wanted on a shelf space and all that. But also there was never like the codes the same way. Like Voodoo and some other ones tried to do the codes with like the things, but then half those went out of business. Like Ultraviolet, I think, even went down. And like, I remember even like getting emailed from Target, like, sorry, the thing that we sold you doesn't work anymore. You could try and transition it over to this other thing. Because like they couldn't even keep it up with these services. Instead, they just all want you to go to like, iTunes or Amazon or whatever, and buy stuff that way for on demand. So it's an interesting parallel where at least they have the in-between with video games because they had CD keys was something that existed, like way before DVDs even existed. So there was like already like a precedent for that where like CD keys just turned into download codes basically. And Steam obviously helped push that as well, right? With activation codes and stuff. So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of interested to see like at this point, I think, as you said, Aaron, it's like inevitable, right? It's like, it's more just a question of like when and what happens in the meantime. Does it just become a collectibles sort of thing? I mean, we're already struggling with like the prices, right? Being too low for games where they're having to like find other ways to monetize after you buy it and stuff like that. So it's like, might as well just make it all digital only, cut out any costs or risks they have, any cannibalization, and maybe even, like you said, put it as part of a subscription thing to even further mitigate risk, right? Because then it's just, oh, well, we get some money, off of the Game Pass or whatever it is to help cover our production costs, potentially, depending on the deal they strike. So I don't know, but a lot of question marks, but also, I guess, as you said, kind of an inevitable cliff for the space. And then I guess maybe some boutique, like game, physical game collectibles that we do see, like, those ones where you can get like a limited run. I think that's what it's called, limited run, where you just get like the limited special edition collector's box kind of things for games. I guess that's the future of physical games at this point. But
vintage. It's going to become vintage.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, it's like you talk about the used games, right, and that sort of thing, right? That's where GameStop started its business, but you also see like those games, as well as used DVDs and stuff, end up at thrift stores, end up in like Dimple Records or like what used to be Tower Records, those kind of stores that will sell like old stuff. And so it's like, I guess that's where like GameStop doesn't need to exist because those already exist to be that marketplace for people that want to buy like used games or like you said, they become just retro collectibles. And you go to like stores that are selling like N64 games next to like, the last remaining physical games. It's like where I still see the last remaining physical boxed copies of PC games half the time. So I don't know, interesting space, but bummer for GameStop, being in that business. I'm interested to see if Ryan Cohen does anything, because he's been slowly taking over the business, it seems like. So he definitely thinks there's something there, but it does seem like it's going towards digital anyway. So I don't know. Wait and see. But speaking of retro, BattleBit Remastered, a game I think we've talked around a few times, but I think we wanted to really dive into now that it's become quite a bit of a hit.
Yeah, it's a cool story. And for those who don't know, BattleBit Remastered is a low poly multiplayer FPS game that can support 254 person servers. It's sort of like a lower fidelity Battlefield, also without the aggressive in-game monetization is kind of how they want to position themselves. But what's cool is that this game was built by 3 developers over the past 7 years. They started in 2016 with BattleBit, which had a lot of issues in the early playtests and such. So early access was stalled. Then it took 4 more years of development and marketing to launch a revamped playtest and to reach 100 concurrent players for the first time. And over that time, the team was supported via Patreon. But it wasn't until the beginning of this year that notable streamers and personalities started finding and bringing attention to the game. And then the game launched on June 15th, so a month and a half ago, for $14.99. And since then has garnered really positive reviews, has been climbing up the charts. And it was announced that 2 weeks after the game launched that it sold 1.8 million units, which is about 30 million or so in revenue. And that was a month ago. And the game currently is still holding up at the number 11 spot on the Steam top sellers chart. And it's still seeing 35,000 peak concurrent daily players. So it really has become a pretty great success story, and major props to the small team for turning it into a win. But really, I think there are a few takeaways rolling through my mind, and we can discuss whichever ones sound most interesting to you. One is just, again, like, how much does fidelity really matter in games, right? And should more teams be building, especially their first games, more in this type of way? So that's one thought. Second is just that success was a long and grueling process to pull off in this case. And so is this actually a model that more developers should be thinking about pursuing, even despite the success that came about? And then lastly, just kind of almost on the flip side of that last point, is that despite the rise in venture capital, even across gaming, we continue to see small teams, small companies like this prove that you can create hits that top the charts, even in multiplayer modes, without raising any venture money whatsoever. Or in this case, I think even really working with a publisher. And so those are kind of like the main talking points in my head. But I'm curious, when you see this story, like, what stands out to you, and like, what does it point to more broadly, kind of about where we are in the games industry right now?
Yeah, for me, I think it really highlights like just some pillars about what game development should really be about, whether you're like a small team or a big team. And that is that you need a good game first and foremost. Like that's always going to be the most important pillar for making a successful game business. Granted, good games sometimes fail, but you don't need like flashy art, flashy graphics, or the fanciest engine, or this huge marketing budget to really have a very successful game on your hands if the game is good. I think that part of a good game is also understanding who your audience is. Like, be very clear of what kind of game you're making and what audience you're serving, because with that you can actually make sure that it's a game that's fun to play for that audience. And that even if you go to kind of like this more low fidelity, lower the quality, quote unquote, quality bar for the game, you can understand what's acceptable for that audience, and what's going to still be interesting and fun to watch for that audience. And the third piece is, again, with understanding who your audience is that through that you can actually nurture and grow your community. And yeah, it was not like an overnight hit. Like they did, as you said, Aaron, it's like 6 grueling years of slow and steady game development and community building and just this slow growth that you can only achieve if you actually understand who your community is. You can actually reach your community and, grow it much more organically in that way. So I think that it really, for me, it's like it highlights kind of like all those points. It's like hit games are not made over time. You really need to have a good game first and foremost. And then I think that you can start thinking about, where do you compromise in all these different areas, whether it's like getting creative on how you reach your community, and you don't have marketing budget, so how are you going to make a splash and whatnot when you launch the game, or low fidelity, lower the quality bar. Like I think that all of that is very available to game developers. Like I think like that constraint of like, hey, it has to be super high quality and you have to have this big marketing budget. It's very much a it's a constraint that we put on ourselves. Players time and time again show that if the game is fun to play, they will play it if you reach the right audience. So it's kind of like that match, right? It's like fun to play, reach right audience, they will play it and they'll see past any kind of rough edges. The other piece to it is like it has been very much talked about on TikTok and Twitch and like all these other social media places. And I think it's like part of that being fun to play is that if it's fun to play, it'll probably be fun to watch and have these memeable moments. But you can't necessarily manufacture those. Like you have to they have to be authentic. So I think that one downside of watching games like BattleBit Remastered is for developers and teams to think, okay, how do I create like these moments that will be like very memeable on TikTok? And if they're not authentic, they're going to wear out very quickly, very rapidly, and not really have kind of like that staying power of like someone watches that, tries the game, and sticks around to play it.
Yeah, I have like a very simple philosophy when it comes to fidelity, like which is summed up as like the fidelity of the graphics needs to be matched by the fidelity of the gameplay. And what I mean are the game mechanics. And so it's like you have these games with these like super great like graphics, 4K, HD, all that stuff, but they're mostly just set dressing. The actual mechanics, like if you actually took the mechanics of the game, you could still do it in BattleBit style, right? Because the graphics aren't actually generally enhancing any of the mechanics of the game. They're almost always like at best animations that look nice to represent things that you could represent as block people or whatever. Because at the end of the day, you're just communicating feedback back to the player. It doesn't need to be high fidelity. Now, obviously, people appreciate like nice graphics, right? That it certainly doesn't hurt. But I think it's kind of funny with examples like BattleBit, because you could like directly contrast it to Battlefield. Is the expectations. So when you see something like Battlefield, you have certain expectations for the gameplay. When you see something like BattleBit, you don't. Right? You're like, oh yeah, I'll be lucky if this thing works. And when it does, and when it works, like sometimes better than Battlefield, you're just blown away. Like you just dopamine's firing off because you're like, whoa, this exceeded my expectations. Like I am really excited now, and that is a huge driver for this game. I think personally, having played it and seeing like, oh yeah, it's cool. Like it's not like 10 times better than Battlefield, but it does some of the small things better. And I think that goes to the other thing with the team of 3 people and the low fidelity means it can pivot towards things that people actually want, where I feel like the Battlefield games have gotten really kind of out of touch with what people actually want. and they're just this big lumbering beast moving forward. They can't pivot. They can't make the changes. Now, obviously, they're trying to, right? Once the game's already like out, they've already sold as many copies as they're realistically going to sell, and they're just trying to salvage the game. They can be a little more responsive. But when they're in production, like spending years and millions of dollars building the game, they don't have time to make huge pivots. They've got these production pipelines, and when you have high fidelity graphics, it is that much more static to what exactly you have in your pipelines. You can't pivot. Like if you just got a bunch of block people, you'd be like, sure, we'll do that this week, even if you only have 3 people. But 3 people with that same level of graphics, if they were to try and do that, that's the problem right there. Like even if they had you were able to use AI to generate that art, it would still be really difficult to deal with that from a technology level to build the gameplay to match that. And so I think it's just one of those things where people kind of underestimate the value there. As you were putting out, like just there's lots of value to be gained from that sort of thing, and like there's room for both to exist on the market. Neither one really needs to like dominate. And I think you put out, Aaron, that we've seen this kind of like Fall Guys or Among Us or some of these other like sort of smaller game hits that have come out that were just about the gameplay, and some of those were just really social dynamics kind of coming out. And I think that's another thing to think about with these is that sometimes like the lowest fidelity game ever can be amazing if you were playing with the right people, right? Like, I mean, Among Us is just Werewolf, and Werewolf is just sitting around in a room with people talking, or Mafia, whatever you want to call it. But like, that's as low fidelity as you get, right? It's just a talking game with some graphics slapped on top. And I think that's just a valuable lesson for game developers. Is like, if you want your audience to have like really great graphics, cool. But like, that doesn't mean you sacrifice gameplay to do so. And if you want to, cool, but like at the end of the day, you're going to be making more cutscenes than you are a game. And I obviously don't try and replicate 7 years of development hell with 3 people. Maybe keep your expectations a little smaller, but I'd point to something like Vampire Survivor as another great example of like a breakout hit where the dude just like bored during Christmas or something and just made it like for the hell of it as like a sort of practice thing, and because he was one guy. And so you never know.
Yeah, there are a lot of examples of these types of games becoming hits, and I think there's going to continue to be many more examples in the future. We've talked in the past about sort of at least sort of like my thesis of what this kind of next era of the games industry is going to feel like, where it's a barbell, where on one side the biggest games with the biggest IPs and the most modes, etc., they're just going to get bigger and get reinvested into and just try to get as many people as much time. And a lot of them are going to pull it off. And then on the other side of the barbell is more the upstart small team double A studios, the UGC tools that enable anyone to build and create. And I think there's going to be a ton of really interesting activity that goes on there. And really, my thesis is that we're going to see a rise in what's going to feel like counter trends in some ways, where we're going to see games that non-professional, non-game developer professionals make that are going to get more attention. We're going to see more people playing in their browsers different games. And we're going to, be seeing more of these, double A kinds of games continue to just stand out in their own domains. And I think that that's pretty exciting, but it's going to be really interesting counter trends. And even just like as another example, with like UEFN Affiliate, which is probably going to be like a new major hub where we see some of these examples. Similar to what we've seen in Roblox in the past is, Devin, you sent a link over before we started about, I think Cypher PK is his name, and he created a UEFN game called Rocket Wars. It's already rivaling the playtime of games on Steam like Among Us. And so I think we're going to continue to see many more of these types of games in different forms on different platforms continue to rise in attention. And I think that's exciting. Probably the downside is kind of the barbell, the middle probably gets hollowed out a little bit. And there are other parts of the industry that it gets harder to get attention and really win at certain levels of budget. But those two sides of the barbell, I at least am very bullish on.
Yeah, definitely making me think of the Flash era.
I was just gonna say that. I was like, man, I'm excited to see that come back. I was like, yes, please. We saw like so much innovation during the Flash era, and just like playing around and Quake development, and not every game had to be like this massive production. And I think that we're overdue for another era of that type of game development.
I think it's kind of second wave mod, right? Where like we had the mod era, as you mentioned, Quake mods, and there was Half-Life mods, and that kind of started dying down into like kind of late into the Half-Life 2 cycle. Just partially because it became really complicated. But now we've got Roblox, we've got UEFN, you've got other alternative stuff like Core. You've got all these platforms now. And I think that's extremely helpful when you have a platform that you can build, or Minecraft even, that people could, like, first off, they've got an install base where people don't have to download something new. I mean, obviously, the example games we gave earlier were, installed new, but they were obviously small and easy to download, and Steam made that pretty easy to discover and download them. But also these platforms make it really easy. And that was, I think, one of the advantages Flash had, as you mentioned, playing stuff in the browser, Aaron. Like, it'll be interesting to see where that goes, because WebGL has kind of like struggled, it seems like, at least with like Unity's WebGL exports. So I'm not sure where we go technology-wise with that sort of browser stuff, but it does seem like the actual platforms will get there. And I don't know, like now with Roblox potentially moving into VR, as it started opening that up, I believe recently. I was just reading about that, I think earlier today. That could then even suddenly VR, you start seeing pop off, because now there's a platform for developing for it that doesn't require this huge complex setup to figure out how to do. So yeah, maybe we're just moving into another era, and maybe a short-lived one, but an exciting one for lots of experimentation, new genres, stuff like that. Maybe this is what mobile needs. I know there's been tons of attempts at building platforms on mobile, and there's Roblox and stuff like that, but maybe we need something on mobile that sort of unleashes this creativity, so we could see lots of new genres emerge, and then the big game companies can copy those and then have new games to acquire users for, basically.
My very final comment is that I don't think it's going to be short-lived. I think this is going to be like a defining attribute of the next like extended era, just as barriers to entry and barriers to creation fall, AI tools come into play, better modding tools come into play. Like this is just going to be much more important for a very long period of time. And I think that's going to be really exciting.
Definitely looking forward to it. The AI tools is definitely going to really address some of the fidelity stuff we were talking about, I think, as well. So be interested to see how that goes. But, we're also interested in what you guys think. So if you have thoughts on this topic or the other topics we discussed, feedback, anything you want to say as well to any of the previous podcasts also, make sure to email podcast@naavik.co. So we're always looking out for good questions, good comments, things like that to share here on the air, as we've done in the past. So definitely do so. But we want to thank the panelists here for a great discussion. Lots of great topics, as always, as this business doesn't seem to stop moving forward. So we will, of course, see you guys next week. Make sure to catch you then.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co, or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.